Part 119. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1184. Clouds of borax and lead rolled and swept towards the pillar of fire in the center of the secret realm. Groups of gray-black ore fell into the pillar of fire, and were then burned into magma by the astonishingly high heat. The liquid form of borax and lead leaked downwards, flowing into the seal set by the elves with their lives, into the purification device that was blown to pieces, and into the veins under the purification device. Into the palace that the elves once regarded as their spiritual sustenance, and the garden where the eternal tree grew. Then, the high heat and strong smoke that had been bound by the seal rose up in the direction of the borax. Elder Fahim's expression changed. Anari Ling and Delavan Losha changed their expressions. Idian's face changed drastically, and he stepped forward and stood sideways in front of the elder. However, let alone a half-legendary warrior, even a legendary warrior could not stand up to the power of countless elven elders who had gathered their lifelong essence. So pale, so weak. Even Gretel saw the smoke column rising in the distance and reaching the sky. Gretel's expression changed, and he quickly asked his senior brother to close the bunker door, close the windows, turn on all the air filtration equipment to the maximum, and let the magic puppet wait to change the filter element at any time. There is an unknown amount of radioactive material in this smoke and dust. Close the door. Close the door. Don't be exposed. If the smoke and dust rise so high and are blown away by the wind, how far will it spread? 100 kilometers? 200 kilometers? Thousands of kilometers? Even, permeate the entire southern continent, and then blow to the black continent with the monsoon? Gretel doesn't know. He only knows that the elves have tried their best to block radioactive damage in the contaminated area for so many years, and it is very likely that all previous efforts were wasted. If only the sun god could restrain the smoke and dust and suppress them. Can the sun god do that? You won't be able to hold on, right? The borax and lead blocks piled outside have almost been shipped, but the yellow light rising over there is getting darker and darker, and it is almost turning into bronze. There are still injuries on it. There are also injuries caused by the glory holy sea that are still lingering. What if you are too tired, consume too much energy, cannot suppress the injury, and just collapse? Even if it didn't collapse, what if it was contaminated by the injury and swallowed up? If he suddenly transformed into the shape of the Lord of Glory, so many people present would really be unable to cry. Damn it, if only it rained. Then, as Greed wished, it rained. It was pattering, not very big, and even the coverage area was not wide. Not even a drop of rain fell outside the secret realm where Gretel was. However, the smoke column in the center of the secret realm was suppressed gently but firmly. From a distance, it looks like someone brought a pot of cold water and poured it on the smoke column. Dense in the center and sparse around it. Not a single bit was wasted, washing the smoky sky in the secret realm from gloomy and gray to clear and transparent. This is an amazing move, Archmage Baebo praised with his hands. Not only did he praise him, he also dragged Gretel over and explained to his junior brother by holding his ears. Look at this cloud of rain. It doesn't take any more or less force. It can control the flow of wind and attract the circulation of water vapor in such a large range. The method can be so exquisite. Even at the legendary level, without the help of magic circles and mythical locks can't do it either. Gretel was still a little confused. Compared to his senior brother, he pays more attention to another point. Look, the sun god seems to be lighting up. It does light up. Above the secret realm, a somewhat dim halo appeared. Compared with what Greed saw when talking to it, the halo was much dimmer, and it was inconspicuous under the midday sun. The entire color is between golden yellow and bronze. At first glance, it looks like a rusted copper plate or a salted duck egg dripping with oil. The fat coming out of the center of the yolk is even a little dark and black. At this moment, the color of the copper plate was getting brighter little by little, as if the raindrops falling on it directly turned into vast energy. And as the copper plate becomes brighter, the rust on it, or the scar in the center of the halo, is also twisting and exploding. The things that were once entrenched on it seemed to be pushed out by a very strong force, and flowed out from the center of the salted egg yolk like grease. If Greed had a sharper tongue, he might have guessed. Hey, have you started popping pimples? Oh no, have you started debreeding? Compared to Greed, who was watching from a distance, Elder Fahim and others who were close to the center of the secret realm could see it more clearly. Especially Elder Fahim and Idian, a legend and a half-step legend, raised their heads and looked at the halo above, their hearts wavering. This is the joy of the world. This is the song of nature. Pitter-patter, among the falling raindrops, countless hazy brilliance lit up. Rise, flutter, fall. Along with the raindrops and light spots, there seemed to be endless sounds in the void. A wail of agony. A sad cry. A scream of fear. The joy of release. A sigh of relief. Finally, everything fell quietly with the raindrops. Open your spiritual eyes to observe, or sink into the emerald dream to observe, and you can even see human faces, large and small, appearing on the surface of those raindrops. Old people, children, men, women. The natives of the kingdom of the sun, the residents of the old world. Those people cried, laughed, or were burned for too long, and their spirituality and memory were almost wiped out. Whether it is being admitted into the kingdom of God as a believer and then being used as a weapon in an attack, or being devoured by the gods in a blood sacrifice. These remaining souls were excluded from the power of the sun god in this gift from the world, and were forever free. The shackles were opened, the pain was healed, and finally, it returned to tranquility and dispersed in the mountains and forests. Very nice. Really not bad. It makes people happy just to look at it. The elves raised their faces and let the rain wet their foreheads and hair, and then silently flowed down the corners of their eyes. With so many souls gaining freedom here and scattered in the mountains and forests here, the spirituality and vitality in the mountains and forests will definitely be greatly enriched. This time, the gift from the world is very good. Elder Fahim sighed softly. Infinite vitality fell on him with the rain, replenishing the vitality that had been taken away by the years, and making his old and tired body strong. After just standing for a while, Elder Fahim felt that his hands and feet were stronger and his back was straightened. Although it won't make you rejuvenate, it won't be a problem to last another 100 or 200 years. I feel like I'm doing better. Idian raised his head and took a deep breath of the fragrant air after the rain. The power that fell on him was gentle, tranquil, and full of vitality, full of nourishing and hair-growing power. This half-step legend, who had been in and out of the elven secret realm dozens of times, leaving numerous hidden wounds on his body, felt for a moment that his illness was gone. I feel that after I finish tidying up this place and bringing it back to life, I might be able to try to become a legend. He held his right fist and waved it in the air, feeling the power rushing from his heart to his muscles and bones, and he was full of confidence. Elder Fahim smiled at him and looked up at the sky. They were all like this. What kind of gift did Virakaka, the sun god, who exerted the greatest strength and took the greatest risk in this operation, get? Will its injuries heal? Can its power rise to another level? Its light has begun to converge, sinking bit by bit, as if it is about to fall into sleep. Can it end its transformation before the enemy arrives? End of month sprint time. End of month sprint time. Everyone, please vote hard. The target for this vote request is 1,300 votes. As long as 1,300 votes are reached, 6 additional chapters will be updated next month. The best-selling selections on the 31st were updated by 10,000 words on the same day, and all additional updates will be returned one after another from November 1st. Thanks to Etkihazuy for the reward of 5,000 starting coins. Thanks to Et for the 1,500 starting coin reward. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1185. The sun god Virakaka fell into a deep sleep, which was reflected in the temple of the sun, that is, the glow on the statue was dim, and the temple's sacrificial fire was dying, like a stove fire that was about to go out. The reflection on the clergy is that the divine power transmitted from the sun god is scarce and the power of divine magic has declined. The high-ranking priests prayed to the gods and received the answer. No reply. For a time, all the temples were very nervous. In particular, the Virgin of the Sun who guards the holy fire has been closely watched and protected. It's all up to them. If the holy fire is extinguished, it will be a big deal. A holy fire is a part of the power of the sun god. During this period, any sun virgin must be well protected. No one can bully them or harass them. As for the kingdom of the sun, it was even more panic-stricken. Especially for the passes towards the north of the kingdom of the sun, all the soldiers who were on vacation were recalled and the number of patrols was doubled. The sword was repolished, the armor was retrimmed. Abi, why do we have to come out so late to guard the city wall? In the howling cold wind, the indigenous warrior Okarid tightened his thick cloak and shivered hard. His cloak was a square blanket woven from the coarsest alpaca hair and inferior cotton, with a round hole in the middle just enough for his head to stick out. A brown cloth belt tied the cloak tightly around his waist, with one hand on each side. He held a spear in his right hand and raised a torch in his left hand. The flame was blown by the mountain wind and sent sparks to his companions. Beside him, his companion Abi, who was being questioned, raised a wooden shield to block the sparks. He shrugged angrily, took out a flat copper pot, unscrewed the lid and took a deep drink. The cold wine was poured into the throat, burning a line of fire along the esophagus. Why? Because those robbers, those devils, they are coming again. Tisk, every year when the dark day approaches, they will come to harass us. But before, we didn't have to patrol so late. Oka paced back and forth a few steps, hiding behind the boulder of the fortress, trying to avoid the cold wind. Abi stretched out his hand to him and generously handed the copper kettle to him. Oka shook his head, pulled out a small woven bag from his belt, took out a gray-green leaf, put it into his mouth, and stuck it to the inside of his cheek. The leaves numbed his body and no longer felt so cold. He breathed a small sigh of relief and stretched. On the opposite side, Abi persuaded vaguely. Be content. The priests have even distributed the holy wine and holy leaves in advance. If they hadn't come out to patrol, these holy wines would not have been available until the dark day. Not to mention the holy leaves. He suddenly stopped and turned around. Oka also turned around at the same time, holding his breath and looking around. However, apart from the whirring of the mountain peaks across the pass, all that could be heard was the crackling of torches. Are you okay? It should be fine. Every time they come, they are the guys who succumb to the evil god, Ba. Without the power of the sun god, they will never become warriors in their lives. Even the evil god looks down on them. If it weren't for the evil god's minions, we would have called you back a long time ago. The two of them stopped talking, gripped their spears and scimitars, and continued patrolling around the inner wall of the fortress. And above the pass they were patrolling, a group of silent soldiers lowered their heads, bent their waists, and silently climbed up the slope. Go! Go! The low-level officers held whips and scolded ordinary soldiers, as well as servants and slaves recruited from the indigenous people. Those skinny slaves, bent over and carrying large baskets of dry food and supplies, trudged step by step. Plateau, cold night, steep mountain road. The cold air poured into the lungs, cutting everyone's chest like a knife, taking away every ounce of strength from their bodies. The knights and officers can still hold on, but the slave soldiers have begun to stagger. Suddenly, a slave soldier staggered and almost fell. With a snap, a whip was drawn immediately, drawing a bloody mark on his shoulder. He didn't dare to say a word, but took out a handful of gray-green leaves from under his clothes, stuffed them into his mouth, and chewed them vigorously. The juice from the leaves made him feel light and airy. He no longer felt pain or cold, and even felt a strange sense of euphoria. As he walked, he suddenly saw chaos in front of him. "Give it to me! Give it to me!" In a slightly flatter recess, two slave soldiers rolled to the ground. One was riding on the other's body, trying desperately to pull at his belt and snatch the small woven bag on the belt. He opened the bag and dug into it hopefully. "No more! Why no more?" He shouted softly in surprise and disappointment, raised his head, and stared at the slave soldier who was pinned down by him. A pair of green eyes, like hungry wild wolves in the night. After staring for a moment, he suddenly pounced on him and dug at his chewing cheeks. "Spit it out! Spit it out! Give it to me!" The two people fell to the ground and rolled into a ball. On the side, the slave soldiers were carrying heavy baskets, walking step by step with their heads lowered, and no one looked at them. His face was numb, his eyes were numb, and each one looked like a zombie driven by a necromancer. Only the low-level officers who maintained order rushed forward. They shouted curses and cracked their whips, but they did not move the two slave soldiers away. As the horses' hooves hit the rear, a high-level knight caught up and lowered his head and asked, "What's wrong, Your Excellency?" "These two slave soldiers are causing trouble." The officer stood at attention, lowered his head, and saluted with his chest. "Please give me some time, I'll take care of it right away." "Humph!" The knight muttered something, as if the natives are dirty and mean, but he really didn't care. He fiddled with the iron helmet studded with emeralds and tapped the shiny golden spurs. The ornate pony walked nimbly across the mountain path with light steps. The intricate embroidery on the woolen military uniforms, the gold ornaments on the stirrups and saddles all shone in the firelight, as if nothing could stain them. Not far away from the horse, the two slave soldiers were still rolling together. The one riding on the opponent's body burst out with astonishing strength, and forcefully opened a gap between the opponent's teeth, and pulled out a ball of gray-green leaf mud from his mouth. He raised his hand and stuffed it into his mouth. The lump of leaf mud was dripping with blood from the bite of his finger, as well as the saliva and blood of the original owner. "This slave is so filthy." The knight frowned in disgust and urged his horse forward. In the crowd behind him, an old man stared at his back and sighed sadly. "Who is it that strictly controls the sacred leaves and holy wine that can only be used for sacrifices and rare occasions in the Sun Temple, and distributes them in large quantities to control slaves and minors? An entire generation of people of the Sun are all ruined, ruined." He lowered his head helplessly, tightened the basket on his back, and continued to move forward. Climb mountains, cross ridges, go around passes, and then the torrent of steel surged down. "Abby! The enemy is coming! Run! Run! End of month sprint time! End of month sprint time! Everyone, please vote hard. The goal of this vote request is 1,300 votes. As long as it is reached, 6 additional chapters will be updated next month. The bestseller selection will be posted tomorrow, with tens of thousands of words added that day. All additional updates will be returned one after another starting from November 1 st. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1186. 10 days before the dark days. The army of the Lord of Glory, including 3,000 regular troops, 2,000 hired adventurers, and 5,000 slave soldiers composed of local indigenous people, crossed the border pass in a mighty manner. A high-level warrior, a high-level priest, and hundreds of indigenous warriors stationed at the border of the Kingdom of the Sun were almost defeated in front of the overwhelming force of the heavenly knights of the glorious Holy See. 7 days before the dark day. The airship leapt out of the rainforest, drew a long arc, arrived at the royal capital, and stopped in the square in front of the royal palace. The high priest held his head high, holding the sun disk, and stepped out of the airship. Although the brilliance on the sun's disk was still dim and weak, it was no longer the bronze color it was when we set off. In addition to the brilliant golden color, it also had a hint of golden-orange flame. Palaces, temples, doors open. Priests and nobles dressed in fine clothes lined up in the square to greet him. The moment the light on the disk shone up, everyone from the king to the priests let out a sigh of relief. 5 days before the dark day. The vanguard of the Lord of Glory's army was already overwhelming, crossing a distance of 500 miles and heading straight for the royal capital. Of course, how many of the indigenous slave soldiers deserted the team, and how many of the indigenous slave soldiers were buried in other places, is a question that will never be known. Governor Martinez and Archbishop Bartolome, these two legendary masters, have long since left the team and are nowhere to be found. 4 days before the dark day. The procession of the great temple and the royal family and nobles set off from the royal capital and rushed toward the holy lake outside the royal capital. Gretel and Archmage Baebo were also among the team, preparing to visit the Dark Sun Festival. The holy lake is still more than 100 miles away from the royal capital. It doesn't sound far, but circling back and forth among the mountains, going up and down the mountain, and walking along the plank road close to the cliff, even if the group of people are strong, it still takes 2 days. Greet followed in the procession, with the noble sedans in front and the priests' sedans behind. It was crowded like a Huangshan mountain road on National Day. However, the senior brother was in charge of him and did not allow him to fly directly, so he could only complain in a low voice. "Why should we follow the team? Why can't we go directly to the Holy Lake? Can't you just let me fly for a while?" "Don't go," Archmage Baebo glared at him with a dark face. "The mountain is so steep. The mountain wind is so strong. With your flying skills as a three-legged cat, you could be swept up and hit the mountain by accident." "Gretel, I told you not to practice flying. I told you not to practice teleportation. Once you have mastered it, even if you can't fly at this time, you can still teleport to the opposite mountain to see the scenery, and then teleport back." "Gretel, my teleportation technique can only be practiced at a fixed point in the hospital. Besides, haven't you been talking about the sense of ceremony and ceremony? After walking for 2 days, it will be enough to have a sense of ceremony. Then it will be more comfortable to go to the lake to watch the sacrifices." "Gretel, rightward arrow. Rightward arrow. Brother, your concept is very advanced. This is what you call an immersive experience. Did you go to the Department of Control and Control some time ago to study?" No matter what, the senior brother strictly prohibited it, so Gretel could only follow the team honestly. Fortunately, the phantom horse can automatically follow and find its way without him having to worry about it. He can even lie down on the horse and sleep. Compared with those walking around, those carrying sedan chairs, and those nervously riding on the backs of alpacas, well, the happiness index is still very high. After walking for 2 full days, it was already late at night when the group arrived at the Holy Lake. Greet slept on the back of the phantom colt without knowing anyone else. It wasn't until the next morning, when he stood on the edge of the lake, that his eyes lit up and he softly said, "Wow! What a beauty! The clear lake reflects the blue sky. The sky on the plateau is extremely blue, and it is reflected in the lake water, dyeing the entire lake into a huge sapphire, without a wisp of white clouds or a trace of variegated color. At the end of the lake, towering snow-capped mountains stretch endlessly. The sun has just risen, and the sunlight shines on the snow-capped peaks, reflecting the white peaks into a golden color, and reflecting thousands of golden lights in the lake. Standing by the lake and taking a breath of the cold air, you feel like you are in a fairyland on earth. Gretel couldn't help but squat down by the lake, stretched out his hand to grab a handful of water, and patted his cheeks, shivering twice in a row from the cold. The snow water from the holy mountain flows here and turns into a holy lake. Whenever the sun god feels tired, he will sink into the holy lake to bathe and recuperate. When he has rested enough, we will summon him again. The middle-aged priest who was responsible for guiding and accompanying Greet and others walked slowly to his side and explained to him. "Dear guest, please come with me on board. The place where we offer sacrifices is not by the lake, but on the holy island in the middle of the lake. There are the temple of the sun and the temples of many gods." While they were talking, the royal family, high priests, and nobles had already begun to line up to board the ship, preparing to go to the island. Greet looked curiously and saw that they were not on ordinary wooden boats, but round and fat boats with both ends tilted up, like straw-woven boats. There are big ones and small ones. The small one can only be said to be like a bathtub, while the big one can have several rooms on it. "Hey, what is this?" Greet asked curiously. While asking, he quietly prepared defensive spells. "Is this straw boat reliable? Could it be that halfway through the voyage, it took in enough water and sank? Let me think about it. What are the defensive spells that need to be prepared in the water? Underwater breathing is needed, buoyancy is also needed, cold and heat resistance is always hanging on the body, but it is best to prepare another spell to prevent clothes get wet. This is a cattail boat woven from the cattails in the holy lake." The middle-aged priest smiled and answered patiently. "Only this kind of cattail boat, which carries the power of the earth, the holy mountain and the sun, is allowed to sail in the holy lake. Don't worry, this kind of boat has been sailing in the holy lake for thousands of years, and there will be no problem." Even if Gretel felt there was a problem, he couldn't use the flying spell at the moment, or take out the magic item ship in a bottle he carried. He followed the priest's guidance and boarded a medium-sized but particularly cute straw boat. The straw boat was painted in the shape of a teal duck, and the sides of the boat were painted with regular patches of reddish-brown, like the feathers of a teal duck. The bows on both sides are specially tied with cattails to look like duck heads, with a pair of flat duck beaks protruding. The cattail boat paddles gently, pushing through the waves, and travels between islands covered with reeds and cattails to the edge of the sacred island. A long stone road stretches from the pier to the center of the holy island. The towering temple gate carved with the shape of the sun stands majestically. Early the next morning, a golden light rose from the top of the snow mountain. Greet stood by the lake waiting for the sacrificial ceremony, and suddenly saw the king being pushed out by them, stripped naked, covered with gold powder, and sent to a small boat. Greet. Wait. Etc. Could this sacrifice be the king himself? I'm sorry that I made a mistake today and set the wrong time. Then, I'll post today's 2 chapters together, and they won't be available tonight. Recommended tomorrow the 31st. More than 10,000 words. Publish a 4,000-word chapter in the early morning. Everyone remember to vote a lot. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1187. Chapter 1184 The Black Sun That Never Sets in the Holy Lake. Publish for more updates, please vote for me. With the mood of watching the excitement, Greet slept until the sacrificial ceremony was about to begin. However, long before he got up, someone was already busy. In the temple, the chosen women priestesses and preservatives of the Virgins of the Sun rose early. Under the guidance of the older priestess, they began to prepare meals for the gods. Monte Patasca, a corn soup with chilies and herbs. Locero, a stew made with fish, potatoes, vegetables, and peppers. Cornbread, carefully baked from corn grown in the temple's sacrificial fields. There are also a variety of foods that have special meanings and require special techniques. All soups, staple foods, and dishes must be prepared in a hurry and before the fish belly is white on the horizon. When the first ray of sunlight passes through the stone lintel engraved with the sun's image and shines into the temple, the sacrifice officially begins. Gretel stood in the queue of priests, looked towards the temple, and softly said, "Wow." A ray of sunlight passes through the hole on the lintel and penetrates straight into the deep temple hall, illuminating the face of the sun god statue without missing a beat. All year round, only in the early morning of the dark day, the sun will shine through the holes and directly shine on the statue beside Gretel. The middle-aged priest who accompanied him explained to him with full pride. These are all miracles and gifts from the sun god. Only the power of my god can do this. Awesome, Gretel gave him a thumbs up. Not to him, but to the first generation, the designers and builders of the temple. How much knowledge of astronomy, astrology, and geography is required to calculate it just right, so that the morning sunshine happens to be so accurate. Modern people with supercomputers may not be able to do this kind of thing. The first ray of rising sun fell on the statue of the sun, and the golden statue instantly bathed the entire temple in golden light. The women chosen by the gods immediately filed forward and placed the food they had prepared in front of the statue. The music plays. Amidst the music, the smoke of various spices and herbs curled up. The sun virgins who presided over the ceremony, and the sun goddess who led them, looked up at the statues and chanted repeatedly, with soft and long voices. "Sun, please enjoy the food your wives have prepared for you." Simultaneously with them, priests serving other gods also offered prepared food to their gods. For example, thick porridge cooked from potatoes, corn, and pumpkins dedicated to the earth goddess Pashamama was dug up by brown-robed priests and buried in the ground. The golden holy wine brewed from corn was dedicated to Kelia, the lord of the mountains, and was lifted high by white-robed priests and poured into the cold lake water. Dedicated to the mother of the ocean, Mama Kaka, the fish caught from the holy lake is roasted on the fire until it is crispy and golden. Gretel turned his head left and right, looking at it dizzyingly. He really wanted to throw 100 mystical eyes at the same time, open 100 camera positions, record it and save it in the mobile tower spirit to watch it 100 times. Although most people who travel abroad will not watch these videos repeatedly after returning home, this does not prevent them from raising their mobile phones and recording each one with great interest. Greet and the others all watched happily. Although Archmage Baebo has roamed the southern continent, he has never stood in such a good position to watch the important festivals of the Sun Kingdom at close range. At this moment, he concentrated on feeling the energy changes on the field. Sarala looked around, her bright silver blue eyes turning around on those gold plates, gold bowls, gold pots, gold cups, silver plates, silver bowls, silver pots, and silver cups. Her pupils almost turned into gold and silver. Bernard and Apia's attention fell more on the food. Seeing them being poured into the ground and into the lake, Greet heard clearly that Bernard swallowed a mouthful of saliva. As for Idion, this half-step legend who was sent over by Elder Fahim to ensure Gretel's safety, leaned lazily against Appa, chewing a piece of green grass in his mouth. But Gretel felt an aura that was not coming out but was extremely sharp from him. Is there any danger around here? It should be dangerous. Whether according to the sun god or according to Elder Fahim's estimate, the legend of the shining god wants to attack. On the winter solstice, when the sun's power weakens to its lowest point, it is the best time to take action. In a place that Greet couldn't see or feel, on the top of the distant snow peak, there were indeed two legends standing side by side. Governor Sainco Martinez of the Governorate of Pelu stood with his sword in his hand, his vermilion velvet cloak flying on the top of the snowy mountain. He lowered his head slightly and looked down at the complicated sacrificial ceremony with cold eyes. The false gods are indeed false gods. They need so many messy sacrifices. And there are actually living sacrifices. It's so ridiculous, don't they know that living sacrifices can only add to the sins of the false gods? This is the responsibility we have been given. Archbishop Bartolome bowed his head and prayed, raised his right hand, and smoothly nodded 9 o'clock on his chest. Destroy the devil and lead the confused lamb back to the embrace of the Lord. To this end, we will not hesitate to fight and sacrifice to spread the glory of the Lord in this land. The two prayed in a low voice, then became quiet again, overlooking the sacrificial ceremony below. The sun gradually rose, and after offering sacrifices to the gods, the sacrificial ceremony finally reached the most important part. The crowd took off the king's fine clothes, raised their jars, and poured a thick layer of ointment over him. Then, 7 or 8 priests surrounded the king, used thin reed pipes to blow gold powder on him. What is this for? Gretel was shocked. Next to him, the priest responsible for accompanying him whispered. The king is the most noble person, and cannot be touched by mortal hands, therefore, the only way to cover his body with gold powder is this way. You, just be happy. Greet was unable to complain for the moment. The only consolation is that even if you inhale a little bit of gold powder, it shouldn't be a serious problem, right? When the king's whole body was covered with shining gold powder, everyone put on him a gold breastplate. Thinking of the cold and hard texture of gold, Gretel sincerely sympathized with the king, a gold crown, and a glittering gold crown. Earrings and gold nose ring. Then, the king walked onto the straw raft by the lake and sat down on the top of the boat in the center of the straw raft. The nobles and priests walked past the boat in turn, each holding various gold vessels and gems and placing them gently to the feet of the king. Hello. Gretel whispered. It's too much, this raft won't sink, it won't sink, it won't sink. It shouldn't sink. The carrying capacity of this ship is quite good, Cyrilla replied in a low voice while staring at the gold gems without moving her eyes. What are these things in the boat for? Why put it in the boat? Before they could think of the time to come, the attendants pushed the straw raft away from the shore and rowed it far to the center of the lake. Then, 1, 2, 3 pushed the king and the boat he was sitting on into the lake, and rowed back directly with a splash, a splash. Under the blue sky, except for the water line left by the grass raft, there was only a lake, a boat, and a king. Not even an oar was left for the king. Hey, why will the king come back later? Cyrilla asked softly in the spiritual connection. Gretel's conjecture was even wilder. Will he never come back? Look at him dressed like this, could he be a direct sacrifice? No way, Archmage Baebo didn't know much about the customs of the Sun Kingdom. However, the Archmage has another perspective. Change a king every year? Then this king is changed too frequently. Even if the king can be changed, what about the king's harem? Will the successor inherit directly? Or should a group be selected every year? No matter how much I think about it, nothing feels right. Amid the discussion, the sun slowly rose, and the golden glow spread over the lake. Thousands of nobles and priests stood around the lake, singing in low voices psalms praising the sun god. The priests who specialize in music played the anthura panpipe made of clay, the Ghana flute made from the leg bones of monsters, and the 5-stringed karango. Low and melodious, rough and bright, light and cheerful music sounded from the edge of the lake to the center of the lake. And when the king's golden figure overlapped with the shadow cast by the sun on him, the solemn and sacred conch sound rang out. Amidst the sound of conch shells, the king raised his arms toward the sun on the boat and sang the sacrificial poem sonorously and powerfully. This voice, this breath, Gretel sincerely admired in the spiritual connection. Although he didn't understand a word of this memorial text, he sincerely thought of Pavarotti's My Son. Hey, it's very appropriate for the occasion, isn't it? After singing a sacrificial sermon, the king held up the golden crown on his head, raised his hands high, and threw it with all his strength. The golden crown drew an arc in the sun and fell into the center of the lake. Next, there are gold earrings, gold nose rings, gold breastplates. Next, there are flowers, gold ornaments, and precious stones piled on the boat. One by one after another, they were thrown into the holy lake. Hey, this lake, so many gold and jewelry are thrown away every year. In the spiritual connection, as expected, Cyrilla's voice came. Gretel looked back and quickly calculated in his mind. Just the gold items I saw today, 30 or 40 pieces, maybe 1 kilogram, 2 kilograms, 10 kilograms. 10 years is 100 kilograms, 100 years is 1 ton. How many years has this kingdom lasted on the shores of the holy lake? In other words, how many years has this sacrificial ritual of throwing gold and silver jewelry into the holy lake continued on the shores of the holy lake? While doing mental arithmetic, he looked back. I saw the silver dragon girl staring at the lake, the tips of her ears trembling. I really want to go down and fish, I really want to go down. Gretel, tell me how deep this lake is. When they are all gone, I can secretly go down and fish. Is it possible to fish? Cyrilla, please stop. Gretel was sweating and quickly tried to dissuade him. He clasped his fingers and counted them one by one for Cyrilla. This lake is very deep. It can reflect such a clear blue color. It is absolutely impossible for this lake to be only 10 or 20 meters deep. Moreover, it is a holy lake made of snow and water. The water is very cold. There are no monsters or divine powers in it. It will definitely be dangerous to go down. Besides, you can't guarantee that every time the king throws gold, it will be thrown in a fixed place. You can't guarantee that gold jewelry will sink straight after entering the water. It must be pushed away by the current. And for so many years, the silt at the bottom of the lake has been layered layer by layer, layer after layer, and I don't know how many layers it has covered. Cyrilla, do you want to dig for gold in such thick mud? If we want gold, we have other ways. Don't do such dirty and dangerous work. That. Cyrilla's beautiful silver blue eyes blinked and blinked, still reluctant to give up so much gold. Gretel was sweating and tried to dissuade him. Archmage Baebo smiled and said nothing, and Bernard wisely defended himself. None of the three people knew that someone on the high snowy peak was also thinking. He actually threw the gold items directly into the lake. Extravagant. Wasteful. This gold should add luster to the glory of our Lord. Is there any way to fish out the gold in this lake? Let's talk about it. Once the false gods are destroyed, we will have enough time to try various methods. At worst, we will drain this lake. Governor Martinez raised his palm like a knife and slashed down, as if he was trying to split the lake shore and let the lake water pour down the side of the valley. After simulating this for a while, he finally stopped and continued to watch. The side of the boat rose little by little. The last gold weapon and the last gem were thrown into the lake. The king stood up straight and suddenly jumped in with a splash. He. Gretel was really surprised this time. No way, this king is not really part of the sacrifice, is he? This is too fierce. A king changes every year. The middle-aged priest who accompanied him couldn't help but sigh. Looking at the strange eyes of the distinguished guests, he could probably imagine what these distinguished guests were thinking about. If it had been any other outsider, the priests nearby would probably have driven them away without him having to say anything. However, this was an absolutely distinguished guest, and he was treated with courtesy even by the sun god. He could only bite the bullet and try his best to explain. Our king is the noble golden man. The gold powder on his body is also a sacrifice to the sun god and the holy lake goddess. Wouldn't he himself be the same? Gretel looked at each other in shock. The middle-aged priest knew what he was thinking without even asking, and he sighed tiredly. Whenever the sun god feels tired, he will sink into the holy lake to bathe and recuperate. The golden man shoulders the heavy responsibility of awakening the sun god. Every year on the dark day, he must swim until all the gold powder has dispersed, symbolizing the awakening of the sun from the sacred lake. "What should I do if I'm frozen and can't swim?" Gretel blurted out. "The lake formed by melting snow from the snow-capped mountains. Winter solstice, the coldest day of the year. Get naked and throw all the gold and gems on the lake, then jump into the lake and swim until the gold powder on your body is washed away." If it were a slightly weaker person, he would be afraid that he would get cramps if he didn't jump in, and then freeze to death in the lake. Anyway, even if Gretel had cold and heat resistance, underwater breathing, wave blessing, and a full set of spell protection, he would not dare to challenge this. How can that be possible? The smile on the middle-aged priest's face froze. He turned back and gestured with his eyes to the king in the lake, who was still swimming around the cattail boat, and continued to explain. "Our king has the blood of the sun god and has the blessings of all gods. He is as comfortable in the holy lake as he is in his own palace. He is frozen, can't swim or anything. It doesn't exist at all." "Oh." Greet silently frowned. Okay, having blood heritage means you are strong, maybe this king is also a high-level warrior or something. Therefore, if he is really frozen, unable to swim, or sinks, it means that the blessings of the sun god are no longer on the king, and the blessings of other gods are also gone. He deserves to die, and he deserves to be replaced by a king, right? By the way, I just applied greasy all over my body. Can I wash it off in cold water? Do you want to support me with some soap or something?" The sound of panpipes, recorders, banjos, and conches on the shore stopped at some point. The nobles and priests lined up along the shore of the lake, silently watching the king's strokes. The sun gradually rose, and then, suddenly, the entire golden holy lake began to dim. Surprises spread. Gretel was pulled backwards, staggering, and retreated between Cyrilla and Idion. It was easy to stand upright and look up. The sky and the earth are dark. The sun hanging high in the sky began to be swallowed up by the huge black shadow little by little. What's so surprising about this? Isn't it just a solar eclipse? Speaking of which, your country's astronomy is a bit lame. It can't even calculate a solar eclipse. However, it's your luck to catch a solar eclipse on the winter solstice. Before a thought could be finished, a huge pressure suddenly came down from the air. Greet's chest felt tight, and his knees almost bent downwards. A dark shadow flashed in the corner of his eye, and Idion blocked the front directly, looking up with a stern look on his face. End of month sprint time. End of month sprint time. Everyone, please vote hard. We are still short of the last 670 votes. As long as we reach it, there will be an additional 6 chapters added next month. Today's best-selling selection has reached 10,000 words. It's a good opportunity to save votes. Everyone, please vote hard. All additional updates will be returned one after another starting from November 1st. Thanks to the Strong Sea Monster for the 5,000 starting coins reward. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1188. The moment Idion stood up, the tightness and depression in Gretel's chest was instantly relieved. It was obvious that the aura of this half-step legendary warrior was enough to repel the long-distance pressure of the legend just by standing still, providing a safe sky for Gretel. Call. Greet took 2 hard breaths and finally felt like he was alive. Just as he raised his head, someone pressed down on his shoulder, making him involuntarily dwarfed by half. "Get down!" a deep voice shouted from behind. Greet squatted down with this force, squatted down, and jumped forward, lying on the ground. "Thank you for not knocking me down directly. If you pounce like this, the impact on the ground will be smaller at least, and your nose won't be flattened on the ground. Greet fell to the ground and glanced furtively. In front of him, behind him, on his left, and on his right, they all fell down like wheat, Cyrilla, Bernard, senior brother Baebo, and even Idion also fell down very skillfully. Why are you so skilled? Gretel buried his face in the withered hay, feeling the itching sensation of the grass blades rubbing against his skin, and complained silently. I understand the truth. Is the other party a legend? It's not shabby to just fall to the ground and pretend to be dead. Moreover, these people are not local aborigines, so there is no need to step in and help the aborigines to seize chestnuts from the fire. However, your movements are too skilled. Especially senior brother Baebo, you actually knocked me down right away. In your past adventures, how many times have you encountered dangerous situations where you needed to hide, throw yourself down, or pretend to be dead to get through? While thinking about it, he quietly outputted a little bit of natural power and discussed with the surrounding environment. The grass blades are softer, please don't prick me, and don't put them in my nostrils. All the bugs around me, please go away and don't crawl on me and don't crawl under me either. The grass roots should grow a little lower and hold onto the surrounding land to prevent the lakeshore from accidentally collapsing. While mobilizing the power of nature, I felt that the surrounding land was gently undulating. It's not strong, it just sinks a little, so that when they lie on the ground, they are 5 centimeters to 10 centimeters lower than the people lying around them who are also lying down. In this way, someone else would block the strong wind blowing close to the lake so that it would not blow directly on them. And in order to prevent the lake water from splashing, they gather in depressions. Around the place where each of them lay down, a small diversion ditch was dug to divert the lake water to other places. It can be said that I am very skilled in making myself lie down in a comfortable position. I don't know if it was Idion's move or senior brother Baebo's move. They lay on the ground and stood idly by. Around them, a group of middle-level and low-level priests were knocked to the ground by the sudden impact. Many people fainted immediately, while many more people were still struggling to hold on. The high priest's body swayed, and he stepped forward and snatched the golden disc from the hands of the sun goddess. Cut your wrist, let the blood flow on the disc, then raise the disc high above your head and chant loudly. The sun turns yellow. Night falls mysteriously. The death of the sun makes time become an instant. The earth refuses to bury its king. Rocky cliffs. Trembling for its master, singing a dirge repeatedly. The disc shines brightly. A golden light that was not too bright, with a hint of bronze, shot straight out from the disc and shot up to a height of tens of feet. This golden light immediately turned downwards and turned into a bright light curtain, covering everyone present. Rays of golden light lit up one after another. From the gold ornaments worn by the sun priests, from the long hair of the sun goddesses, and the accessories of the sun virgins, from the statues of the sun god, the main hall of the temple, and even the outer walls and squares. There is strength and weakness, light and darkness. Some are like bonfires, some are like torches, and some, under the sun that is engulfed inch by inch, look like dim fireflies. However, these dots of golden light actually condensed under the dim sky, lighting up the holy lake that had been darkened by the sun being swallowed up. Viewed from a high altitude, it looks like a new sun rising in the holy lake. This is their usual mission. Year after year, year after year, they come to the edge of the holy lake, praise the sun, sing the praises of the sun, reduce the power to the weakest sun, and wake up from its slumber. The only difference is that the hymn that was usually sung in the middle of the night was moved to the moment of the solar eclipse by the high priest. The low and melodious panpipe, the rough and bright jenna flute, the majestic and solemn tree drum, and the sacred and distant conch all played together in the light curtain. The priests banged and played various instruments, singing praises to their gods and awakening their spirits. The louder the music, the more orderly and high-pitched the carols, and the brighter and more concentrated the golden light. On the top of the snow peak, the faces of the two legends of the glorious Holy See became more and more gloomy and angry. Despicable believers in false gods. Governor Martinez clenched the sword at his waist and raised his thick eyebrows. He took a step forward, and his thick military boots left a deep footprint on the top of the snowy peak. I originally wanted to save my strength to deal with the false gods first, but instead of attacking them with all my strength, they actually dared to resist. It's a pity that in order not to alert the false gods, we can't kill them all first. Moreover, our people's marching speed is also a little slow, so they can't rush here immediately to pray to the Lord with us. Archbishop Bartolome said calmly. He stretched out a white palm from his wide sleeves, with a string of rosary beads surrounding it, pointing downward. Do you want me to come with you? No. I'll do it. The governor said coldly. He pulled out the sword, held it tightly with both hands, and rested his forehead on the sword's spine reverently. The next moment, the long sword that had accompanied him through thousands of mountains and rivers and had been stained with countless blood flashed a bright seven-color light, and soon returned to pure white. And the pure white light lit up little by little, illuminating his face, illuminating the snow peaks under his feet, illuminating the swirling snowflakes and ice cubes. Finally, it turned into a blade of light that reached the sky and penetrated the earth, slashing across the lake. With one slash, a storm surged. Greed was lying on the ground and felt the hair on the back of his head being pushed to the side by the violent cold wind. The collar and cuffs were filled with cold wind, and the reeds on the shore of the lake bent deeply. This sword seems to be just a glow of nothingness, but it can even push away the air on both sides of the blade. With one chop, the lake water split. The light blade cuts across the lake, soundlessly, pressing down inch by inch. A deep crack was instantly cut into the deep lake water, just like Moses parting the Red Sea. While Greed was busy, he raised a secret eye close to a temple priest standing nearby. After a quick glance, the crack in the lake stretched from the shore here to the foot of the snow peak. It was about 10 feet wide and bottomless. As for the boat and the king in the middle of the lake. King! King! Where is the king? The water wall stood firm and smooth as a mirror. Not even a human figure or blood could be seen, let alone a king. With one slash, he aimed at the sun temple on the shore of the lake, aimed at the sun disk held high in the hand of the high priest, and pressed it down solemnly. Gretel could only be grateful that he was an outsider and was not placed in the center of the ceremony, dozens of meters away from the high priest. Even so, this powerful sword energy made his hair stand on end and he felt like he was suffocating. He is like this. What kind of pressure does the high priest bear when he confronts the legendary power head-on? Gretel didn't know and didn't dare to think about it. But fortunately, the high priest is not fighting alone, and he is not alone against this overwhelming pressure. Flames soared into the sky. With a shout, several warriors standing in the crowd of nobles waved their weapons upward with all their strength. Battle axe, battle hammer, spear, bolas. Weapons made of gold, bronze, ground from animal bones, with wooden handles inlaid with obsidian, all kinds of weapons, used in rituals or battles, stained with blood or not stained with blood, rose up. Eye-searing flames. Condensed into the form of flames, condensed into the form of the sun or moon, condensed into the form of a beast, Gretel even saw the prototype of several runes in it. Transparent, translucent, golden, or blood-colored, separated from the weapons, or even separated from the fists of the warriors, they hit the falling sword energy like meteors. Boom! Boom! Boom boom boom! Explosions sounded one after another. Hitting the pure white sword energy, a burst of fire exploded, and stars fell down. With one explosion, there was no change in the sword energy. With 10 explosions, there was no change. With 100 explosions, the brilliant lightsaber seemed to pause a little, and the white light condensed on the blade seemed to be smeared with traces of light. Shadow. Efficient. Continue. Someone shouted from below. Not surprisingly, the second round of flames hit him one after another. Finally, the mottled and stained light blade fell on the light mask made of golden light. The mask of light shook violently, and the high priest's whole body shook violently, a mouthful of blood spurted out, and turned into little golden light that merged into the mask of light. At the same time, many temples on the island were lit up with colorful lights. The temple of the Earth Mother, the temple of the Lord of the Peaks, the temple of the Ocean Mother, the temple of the Sacred Lake Goddess, the temple of the Quetzalcoatl and the God of Fertility. Each of them raised different flames and joined the light mask. From the surrounding islands and even the lakes at the foot of the peaks, clear brilliance emerged, rushing towards the mask of golden light. The light blade was lifted up and dropped. There was no sound, as if the air had condensed into a solid substance at this moment, but Gretel felt a roar in his ears, like thunder. The mask vibrated violently again and suddenly exploded, scattering little flying fireflies. However, these streams of light did not give in. They rushed into the pure white light blade and exploded one by one. Almost in the blink of an eye, the pure white light blade turned into colorful colors, dimmed, and disintegrated. The high priest of the Sun Temple, the dozen or so high-level priests around him, and even the warriors who struggled to take action, all fell to the ground silently. One strike. Just one hit. Just one strike from legend almost exhausted the power of everyone present. Sure enough, only legend can fight against legend. Hey, Sun God, have you finished your transformation? Get up and get to work. End of month sprint time. End of month sprint time. Everyone, please vote hard. We are still short of the last 500 votes. As long as we reach it, there will be an additional 6 chapters added next month. Today's best-selling selection has reached 10,000 words. It's a good opportunity to save votes. Everyone, please vote hard. All additional updates will be returned one after another starting from November 1st. Thanks to @RidingPigTiger for the reward of 10,000 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1189. A pure white blade shines from the top of the snow peak. Across the sky and across the lake, it is so majestic that mountains seem to be pressing down on your head. The first sword fell towards the crowd. The high priest of the sun god, many priests and many nobles and warriors vomited blood and collapsed. The second sword fell into the temple. Many temples on the island collapsed. The golden statue of the sun, the jade inlaid statue of the Lord of the Peaks, the statue of the Mother of the Ocean inlaid with pearl shells, and various other statues were exposed to the sky one by one, and then collapsed, disintegrated, and their brilliance was extinguished. The third sword. And the third sword. Greed was horrified. Another sword strike, who can stop it? Are you going to kill them all? Fortunately, the sword did not fall towards the crowd, but was lifted up and lifted into the air. A sword flew across the sky, and the sword energy extended straight up and down, like a light screen dividing the world into two halves. Underground, water gurgled and surged in. Apparently the island was split open, and the lake water followed the cracks and poured into the temple of the sun. And above, the snow-white screen of light rose to a certain height, and disappeared as if it was swallowed up by something. They started killing gods. In my ears, the voice of Archmage Baebo came softly. Gretel was shocked. Taking advantage of the fact that the enemy legend didn't notice him, or that his attention was not on the ground at all, he quietly turned his face and looked up. There seemed to be countless openings in the dark sky, which had become gloomy because the sun was blocked. The sharp sword light shot into it and came out from those openings, with an ominous dark red color like blood. A low level of panic passed through the crowd who were lying on the ground, on the verge of fainting, or pretending to be fainting. The sun god is injured. Is he going to die? Will those despicable outsiders really kill him? I don't know, he was seriously injured once. Gretel listened with ears pricked up and watched with wide eyes. The tension was a bit tense, but it wasn't the kind of fear that the earth would collapse. Anyway, senior brother Idian and Burbo were both here, so their lives should be saved. What he is more concerned about is the live demonstration of the glorious Holy See. How to defeat a god. Oh, correction. In other words, the pre-question of this question, how to hit a god. Greed had no idea. If you see an indigenous god along the way, or an eagle god or a snake god, don't hesitate to go up and do it. There is a physical god in the human world, physical combat, magic, and divine arts. There is always one suitable for you. However, if it is a god like the god of nature, or the god of war, or the goddess of springs, the matter is different. According to Elder Tapros of the Order of the God of Nature, they probably do not exist at all. A thing that doesn't exist, I want to hit it, I want to kill it, probably. Kill all the believers, or at least force them to convert. If it was the Lord of Glory, Gretel would have no idea. Lord of Glory, if you say it exists, it is also a collective belief, it may also be a product of collective unconsciousness. You say it doesn't exist, that heavenly mountain is clearly there. To kill the Lord of Glory, we must first kill his followers, and then, perhaps, find the alien space that stores a large amount of faith power and blow it up. And this sun god, Gretel couldn't say clearly. If you say it does not exist, it does have its own independent consciousness. If you say it exists, where does it exist? Temple. Idol. Altar. Or, a different space? Greet asked Elder Fahim, but Elder Fahim just warned don't explore this issue until you get close to the legend. I asked Udian, and he vaguely said, it may be related to the spirit world, so when they fight, you must not enter the Emerald Dream. I asked Archmage Baebo, and Archmage Baebo's answer was, its existence is different from what we generally understand. In short, it is almost impossible to attack it without being legendary. Gretel couldn't come up with a reason. But today, after seeing the attack from the legend of the Glory Holy See, he roughly understood something. Gods, especially beings like the sun god Virakaka, who are rated as demigods by the parliament, their daily existence is probably not in the main material world, but in a different space, or a spiritual world, or something similar. Plain. So, we need legendary warriors or legendary spellcasters, so that their attacks can tear through barriers and attack the opponent powerfully. What Gretel didn't know, Governor Martinez and Archbishop Bartolome knew very well. Governor Martinez slashed out with his sword, splitting the clouds and sky. The Archbishop had prepared the spell for a long time and released it in an instant. A bit of shining white rose from his hand and instantly turned into white light. The 7-level heavenly mountain stands in the white light, with 1,000 feet of brilliance, pressing down. Found it? This false god is hidden deep enough, but no matter how deep he hides, he must have an anchor in this world. When you reach the realm of demigods, your way of existence is different from that of humans, or in other words, from beings in the material world. Attacks limited to the material world cannot involve it, but if it wants to interfere with the material world, it must be anchored in some way. Either a temple that is strong enough, or a priest that is strong enough. Either it is a holy place imbued with too much of its aura, allowing it to be positioned accurately. Or, it is other existences closely related to it, such as the body it used in the material world before becoming a demigod, or a descendant with its bloodline. Without a strong enough anchor, even if these demigods want to interfere with reality accurately, it is very easy for them to go wrong. Correspondingly, if you find this anchor point, it will be easy to follow the clues and break the distinction between the material world and other planes. Last time, they alerted the sun god by killing the king and the royal family, but this time, at the time when the sun god was at his weakest, they interrupted his sacrifices, chopped down his temple, and killed the sun god in his holy place. Kill its king. Sure enough, this false god couldn't help but let out a trace of his aura. Take advantage of the victory and kill it. The 7-level heaven mountain unfolds leisurely. Greet lay on the ground, pretending to be unconscious, and even closed his eyes tightly, not daring to let the enemy notice him at all. For a moment, I felt a brilliant golden color shining through my eyelids and onto my retina. He quietly opened his eyes a crack and took a peek. On the dim to a bit black sky, layers of clouds had already piled up before I knew it. Whether it was a dark cloud or a white cloud, Greet couldn't tell for a moment. All you can see is that the heavenly mountain emits thousands of golden lights, shining on the clouds like a churning sea of clouds. In the sea of clouds, there are countless church spires standing faintly. And above the spire of the tallest church, a white light shot straight into the sky. Up, up, high into the sky, into another layer of white clouds. In the center of the holy clouds, a sacred church looms. At the top of the church, stood an angel in white robes who was 10 times 100 times taller than the church. The clouds are billowing and spreading to both sides, like 3 pairs of powerful wings behind an angel. The angel lowered his head and raised his arms. A golden light extended from his fingertips and shot straight out. In the void, it seemed as if a thick curtain was torn apart by the golden light, revealing a golden disc with a bit of bronze. Golden light fell on the disc. The horizontal black scars began to grow crazily in an instant, spreading to every corner of the disc. Roars, wails, screams, and howls filled the whole world. "It's my mother! My mother! My wife! My daughter!" On the holy island, among the people who fell to the ground, someone suddenly screamed like crazy and stretched out his arms to the sky. "Didn't you say that she became the concubine of the sun god? Why is she in so much pain? What are you doing? What are you doing?" These painful whines made Greet's hair stand on end. What's even more terrifying is that in the midst of such continuous pain, there are still hymns floating in the air, falling from the void. Beautiful, ethereal, full of infinite joy and blessings. It was the voice that sang praises to the Lord of Glory. Those who sing the praises do not care about the suffering of the natives, the angels who attack do not care about the suffering of the natives either. It glanced down, raised its arm again, and pressed it gently. A ball of sacred, solemn golden light, larger than the disk, fell towards the almost completely black disk. The moment it almost landed on the disk, the entire bronze disk suddenly shone brightly. From bronze, to golden, then to bright yellow, then to orange, yellow-white, and pure white. The gloomy, dark, and painful atmosphere was swept away from the entire disk, and it rose directly to meet the golden light, and then headed towards the angel of glory. The 10,000-word explosion is over. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please give me a guaranteed monthly ticket for next month. Don't forget to vote for me tomorrow. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1190. The Sun God Takes Action. Gretel opened his eyes wide. Is this the right thing? After eating so many gifts from the world and sleeping for such a long time, not to mention advancing, the main body's injuries must have healed. Besides, when he was in the elven secret realm, he watched helplessly. The dark scars on the bronze disc had clearly been expelled by the sun god. There is no reason why it is still on my body now. After being attacked by the legend of the glory holy sea, it is still spreading. Fake, all fake. But hey, I like it. He just had to lie down quietly like this, quietly pretending to be seriously injured, about to die, and his breath was extremely weak, and then when they attacked with all their strength, they would swallow him up again. Work harder. Kill them. He opened his eyes wide and enjoyed watching, but he didn't sit up yet just to be on the safe side, he could still see lying down anyway. And around them, the sun priests have climbed up one after another, supporting themselves and chanting. Worship you, sun god, as you ascend. You rise, you shine. Make the starry sky retreat. You are the king of gods, you are all-inclusive. We are born from you and become sacred because of you. The high priest held the sun disk high. This time, the light emitted from the disk was no longer a dull bronze color, but turned into a clear, sun-like brilliance. The sun goddess's cheeks were red, they raised their arms high, and their long golden hair moved automatically without wind, just like the thousands of rays of brilliance emitted by the sun. The nobles and warriors with the blood of the sun were even more excited. They waved the weapons in their hands, ran and roared, their bodies were blazing with flames, and two of them simply flew off the ground. If Gretel had not made a mistake in his judgment, this was clearly a sublimation of bloodline and there were signs of advancement. Tisk, descendants of gods beside him, Archmage Baebo sighed softly. It's so easy to climb up. Senior brother, do you want it too? Greet looked sideways. The Archmage shrugged. Who wants this kind of thing? It's easy to use at low levels, but when you get to high levels, you'll know that this crap is a lifelong shackles. If you want to cross the source of blood and climb to legend, it's many times harder than others. Yeah. A silver head poked out from the side, with silver blue eyes blinking. Archmage Baebo was startled and quickly pushed her back. I didn't tell you. The bloodlines of dragons and humans are different. Gretel, please remember that bloodlines cannot be mixed casually. Even if you want to cultivate followers in the future, do not cultivate those with indigenous divine blood. The upper limit is too low. Greet nodded obediently, lay down, and continued reading. Archmage Baebo has thrown out a lot of detection instruments and alchemy puppets, and is ready to detect the energy changes in this battle between demigods and legends. There were also two alchemy birds flapping their wings and flying high. Greet was very suspicious that if there was a chance, the eldest brother would actually want to receive a few drops of divine blood, or pick up some legendary parts or something. The louder the prayers below, the more resources Virakaka, the sun god, will receive. The bright sun rose towards the angel and sucked the angel into the disk with just one stroke. The figure that stood proudly at the top of the holy city of light, with wings of light spread out as if it could cover the entire sky, was sucked in without any resistance. The closer to the sun disk, the smaller the body becomes, the closer to the sun disk, the darker the color, the closer to the sun disk, the more distorted the shape. From reaching the sky and reaching the earth, it has become dozens of feet tall, several feet tall, dozens of feet tall, as big as a football, as big as a fist, and as big as a dust particle. From brilliant pure white, dyed with slight yellow, and then dropped to bright yellow, golden yellow, bronze, and dark brown. The 6 wings retracted into 2 wings, and the 2 wings retracted into an ordinary human form. The ordinary human form curled up and buckled, leaving only a small ball. Ah! The ball became smaller and smaller, smaller and smaller. When it fell on the sun's disk, a layer of black smoke immediately rose up, and a tragic howl resounded through the sky. At the same time, the angry shouts of the sun god Virakaka also lingered over the holy lake. Ah! How dare you attack my kingdom? Attack my people. Attack my holy land. Die. Die. I already understand your power. Who is the Lord of glory? What is the so-called supreme God? Who is not the master of light? Who is not the sun god? Amidst the roar, the golden light was like a wheel, spinning and slashing downwards. Archbishop Bartolome's expression changed slightly, but his prayer posture did not change. He lowered his head and murmured to himself. Our Father in heaven. May everyone hallow your name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we have forgiven our debtors. Lead us not into temptation but deliver us from evil. Following his prayers, countless people in the 7-story holy mountain were praying, singing, and praising. The ethereal hymns linger over the holy lake, soothing fear, and washing away the dust. For a time, the singing voices of the sun priests were suppressed. Some young nobles, and even younger priests, have begun to have blurry eyes, and are about to kneel down to the holy mountain. It's this move again, it's this move again. Archmage Baebo's face turned gloomy and he looked back. Here we go again. The reason why the glorious Holy See is so annoying is that their divine art and brainwashing power are extremely powerful. On the battlefield, he can use the holy mountain to suppress people of other faiths and become his followers. The efficiency is very high and the results are very fast. After a battle, not to mention ordinary soldiers, even priests can brainwash 17 or 8 people. Those natives will believe whoever they like, but your own family can't stand it. Turning his head, he looked first at Bernard, who was the lowest level and the weakest mentally. The barbarian leaned against Appa, chewed a grass stem, and played time leisurely. When he saw the Archmage looking at him, he bowed his head politely and said, "Your Excellency Archmage, when will they finish fighting?" "Okay," looking at his clear eyes, "it seems like there is nothing to worry about." The Archmage looked at Gretel again, and saw the child beating time and singing softly, with a look of contentment on his face. "Daddy hair 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 hair, daddy hair 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 hair. Archmage." He slapped Gretel on the forehead. "If you have nothing to do, get up and help me measure. Manipulate the golem. Record the data. Don't just sing here." The small movement below did not alarm the 2 legends above. The holy mountain shone brightly, withstanding the attack of the sun disk, and actually suppressed it so that it couldn't get close for a while. At this moment, Archbishop Bartolome raised his head and looked at the governor. The legendary warrior nodded heavily, raised his hands, and grabbed the air. The light emitted from the holy mountain was actually caught in his hand, turned into a snow-white lightsaber, and thrust straight out. This sword combines the strength of the 2 of them and carries the majesty of the Lord of Glory. It is already the strongest attack they can make without damaging their roots. Last time, the false god was injured by this move and had to leave the kingdom and flee thousands of miles away. And now it is the winter solstice, and it is catching up with the solar eclipse, which is when its power is at its lowest. The tip of the sword made no sound as it sank into the center of the sun. Governor Martin Rees raised his eyebrows. "This feeling feels wrong." He changed his moves very quickly and immediately raised his hand, as if he wanted to pick out the angel. However, when the lightsaber was raised again, there was no tip, leaving only a flat blade. On the contrary, behind the sun, thousands of rays of light shot out, pulling out a bright rainbow. Red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, purple. Every ray of colored light does carry a little bit of power. However, the scattered holy light is no longer holy light, and there is no need to think about using it to injure a false god. Despicable outsider. How can this little evil power harm my body? Virakaka, the sun god, roared in the sky. Gretel covered her mouth and laughed. Yes, it is true that he instilled a lot of knowledge into the sun god, including the scattering of light, the wavelength of light, as well as infrared and ultraviolet rays. No, we can't win. The 2 glorious legends looked at each other and understood this helpless fact. Archbishop Bartolome gritted his teeth and said, "It's pretending that it's still injured. It's despicable. You go first." "I'll stop you," Governor Martinez said decisively. Without waiting for the other party to answer, he knelt down with his sword in hand and prayed softly. The white light on his body became brighter and brighter, becoming more and more solid, and gradually turned him into a deserted man. "Let's go together." The archbishop responded solemnly. "From here back to the governor's area, it's 1,000 miles away. The warrior's ability to survive is much stronger than the spellcaster. Moreover, even if they return to the governor's area, two people still need to support each other to defend the territory under the attack of a demigod." He stopped talking, but retracted his arms, palms outward, and pressed them tightly against his chest. He knelt down on his knees, his body slumped back, and his whole body trembled slightly. Both palms moved forward slowly, inch by inch, like pushing a mountain, pushing out the mountain of light above the head. The 7-story holy mountain was aimed at the sun and pressed down like the sky. The sun's disk trembles slightly, and the surface is filled with flames. It is obviously 120,000 times more prepared to resist, or even engulf this holy mountain. The two are getting closer and closer, and the glorious holy mountain has not shrunk because it is close to the sun. It is obvious that the power it contains is extremely powerful. Seeing that they were about to collide, Gretel filled himself with defenses, preparing to withstand the aftermath of the collision. At the bottom of the holy mountain, an unprecedentedly bright sword energy suddenly jumped out and hit the center of the sun. Boom! The sky and the earth collapsed, and the holy lake surged. The moment before the mountain of light hit the sun disk, it suddenly exploded and turned into thousands of light blades sweeping downward. Screams, whines, cries for help, loud sounds. Lake water, wine, and blood flowed everywhere. Heads, limbs, weapons, sacrificial vessels, and even temple masonry were flying everywhere. Obviously, this legendary priest's shattering god art was gambling on. Sun god, are you going to pursue us, or are you going to save your people? Ask for a guaranteed monthly ticket at the beginning of the month. Ask for a guaranteed monthly pass. Please help me keep this book in the top 10 of the monthly fantasy list. This exposure is very important to the author. Also, the book review area is open, so everyone can have fun. The book reviews posted a few days ago will also be released one after another. Please subscribe. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please vote for recommendation. Please review the book. Asking for all kinds of things. Special efforts are made to seek guaranteed monthly tickets. This month, Cat, 4 monthly tickets plus extra updates, plus 3 extra updates from last month's rewards, a total of 7 updates. Keep working hard. Thanks to Lin Ming for the 3000 starting coin reward. Thank you for the 500 starting point reward from Pialing. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1191. Mean. Virakaka, the sun god, swore angrily. While cursing angrily, he shed golden light and enveloped his people. Those are his priests, his concubines, his blood descendants. Those despicable outsiders could just beat them up and run away, but he couldn't just leave them alone. Without priests to convey his will, without the sun goddess as the carrier of his arrival, without the royal family flowing with his blood to protect his status, he suffered heavy losses. Let's not talk about others, just the Quetzalcoatl god, the ancestral god of the previous royal family. When his descendants were deprived of the throne, to what extent did his power drop? Mean. Idion jumped up and cursed loudly. While cursing, he waved the elf moon blade and tried to block it. Block the light blade directed at Gretel. Block the light blades that are fired at yourself, at Bernard, and at this group of people. Block the gravel flying around, block the light blades shooting at the weak around you. As a warrior, you have the ability to challenge the strong with dignity. Attacking the weak when you can't defeat them, using innocent bystanders to hold back the strong, what kind of skill is that? Idion only regretted that he could not grow 8 hands. It would be great if he was a spellcaster. The area that a spellcaster can cover is definitely more than this. Mean. Archmage Baebo was also scolding, but the volume was not high and could only be heard by a few people around him. A qualified spellcaster would never waste effort on this. However, the Archmage's men were not slow at all. Waving his hands continuously, invisible and formless barriers flew out one by one, resisting, absorbing, refracting, reflecting. On the premise of protecting yourself, if you can block more, just block more. Not to mention that the enemy of the enemy is also a friend. Protecting these people at the scene will free up the Sun God to pursue the two legends. In the final analysis, it is still beneficial to the Parliament. Even if the level is a little lower than that of Udian, the range that Archmage Baebo can protect is much larger than that of Udian. The invisible barrier keeps spreading outward, 100 square meters, 1000 square meters, 2000 square meters. In an instant, a large area of the fallen people around him had been protected by him. Of course, if he needs further treatment or something, he won't be able to do it, and it depends on Gretel. Archmage Baebo thought like this and turned to look at Gretel. When he turned his head, his field of vision was completely empty, not a single ghost in sight. Moving his eyes again, Gretel had already rushed out and headed straight for the high priest. That speed would put the rabbit with an arrow to shame. Cyrilla, Bernard, Appa, he shouted while running wildly. You know the standards. Help with triage, open the airway, Cyrilla pays attention to marking, and Appa helps stop the bleeding. I will do the rest. Battlefield first aid. Come on. He quickly shielded himself. They are given by legendary mages, exchanged for meritorious deeds in the council, and received under various circumstances. In short, give priority to stimulating the defense of magic equipment and save all mana for subsequent treatments. While sheathing her shield, she ran straight forward. After running out for more than 10 steps, there was a rustle of wind behind him. Udian had already caught up and grabbed his belt. The moonblade in his right hand flew around, blocking all kinds of dangers, and he lifted him up with his left hand. Where to? Look for the high priest. When playing in a group, of course you have to give priority to healing. This is common sense, right? Good. Udian responded, jumped forward, and was in front of the high priest in a flash. The high priest had the highest rank, but he was also the hardest hit. He was lying on the ground with blood pouring from the corner of his mouth, as if he was breathing too much and not taking in enough air. Gretel frowned, his hands flew up, and the electrocardiogram and blood pressure monitor fell on the high priest one by one. If you want to step forward to touch his breath and roll his eyelids, Udian steps forward, holds a small tube of potion, and pours it directly into the person's mouth. Do not. Gretel blurted out. I still haven't figured out where the injury is, whether the patient is conscious, whether he has the ability to swallow on his own, whether the airway and esophagus are damaged. Just pour it in now. What if he chokes directly into the airway and choking causes problems? Before he finished shouting, Udian helped the person, pried the teeth, and poured the medicine. The 3 procedures were completed in one go. The light green potion gurgled in, and Gretel almost thought he had seen it wrong. Do these potions turn into light spots at the entrance and fly directly into the high priest's body? In any case, the effect of the secret healing potion made by the elves is still strong enough. A tube of potion as thick and long as the little finger entered his mouth. The high priest immediately opened his eyes, breathing heavily, and was able to sit up. Gretel quickly glanced at the screen and saw that his heartbeat and blood pressure were basically normal. He rushed over and observed his face while speaking urgently. Communicate with the sun god. Let him chase the legend, and we will treat him here. The high priest shook his head, feeling a little more awake, straightened up, and began to look around. His target here was the most obvious, and he attracted the most hatred. When the mountain of light exploded, half of the attacks were directed at him. At this moment, Blood flowed all around, and the priests and sun virgins fell to pieces. There were low moans, and more people were silent, and I didn't know whether they were alive or dead. The matter was urgent, and Greed had no time to consider cost-effectiveness. He stood up straight, activated the fortune observation technique, picked out the ones who were seriously injured, but not too serious, and could be revived immediately, and took a circle around them. Cure fatal wounds. Cure fatal wounds. Cure fatal wounds. Pull up 5 or 6 in one go. He took one shot, and Idion went over to pick one up and put it down next to the high priest. The high priest breathed a sigh of relief and immediately called them over. A group of people knelt on the ground and murmured prayers. Soon, golden light spread from them and rose towards the sun god. Soon, the sun god Virakaka converged his golden light, turned the sun, and flew away. The soldier who cut him down. The priest who put a lot of disgusting souls into his wounds and made him unable to recover for so many years. Don't even think about running. No one can escape. Relying on the power of the divine explosion, Archbishop Bartolome did delay for a while. The legendary priest wanted to run away, and he was very fast. He carried Governor Martinez, dodged and almost jumped forward. After only 2 jumps, they arrived at the teleportation array prepared by the two as a retreat. They stepped into it and traveled hundreds of miles away. The teleportation array was exhausted, exploded, and turned into rubble. The next moment, the sun god Virakaka's sun disk had already landed above. You can't run away. The sun in the sky roared loudly. Following the roar, starting from the sun temple in the royal capital, one by one the temples lit up one after another. All the temples. All the priests. All my people who believe in me. Be my eyes, be my ears, sense the enemy's breath for me. My power exists everywhere on this land, you guys can't escape. The sun god flew away. Gretel also breathed a sigh of relief and began to pick up the sun priests who were still breathing one by one. According to battlefield first aid standards, classification, labeling, and emergency treatment. Open the airway. Emergency stop the bleeding. Bandage open pneumothorax. Repair leaky airways. After the first batch of the most urgent and fatal matters were dealt with, Cyrilla and Appa immediately stepped in. Brainless pat therapy can treat fatal injuries, serious injuries, moderate injuries. Light rained continuously, falling on the heads of the injured. When one priest is rescued, one priest will join in the treatment. When 10 priests are rescued, 10 priests will be free to save people. Priests, virgins of the sun, shuttled among the wounded on the ground, waking them up, stopping their bleeding, and bandaging them. Even with the mindless shooting therapy, the situation on the court gradually improved. Except for those who died on the spot and could not be saved, those who were injured, unconscious, missing arms and legs, at least those who had recovered their fighting strength, those who were able to get up, those who were really injured too seriously, at least they could save a life. Gretel walked around and around the holy island, and finally breathed a long sigh of relief. His hands and feet became weak, and he slumped down. Thank God, everyone who could be rescued was rescued, and his trip was not in vain. Next, it's up to the sun god. This big boss, if I catch up this time, I wonder if I can kill a few legends. 1. 2. You can't kill none of them, right? Even if he didn't kill any of them, he still didn't believe that only 2 legends came during the invasion of the Holy See. It can kill all other invading armies, and in a short period of time, it can also severely weaken their vitality. But, asking the sun god to do this kind of work is a bit overkill. By the way, even if you don't kill any of them, don't let any legend come back here after a complete detour. There is no legend on their side. Udian, senior brother Burbo, and the high priest, even if the 3 of them join forces, they may not be able to withstand a legend. While thinking about it, Gretel looked at the sun. Thank God, the eclipse was over and the sun had returned, counting the time and identifying the direction. Stand on tiptoes, stretch your neck, and look north. Tisk, it's all blocked by the snowy mountains, so I can't see anything. Senior brother, how about we put some flying equipment out and go take a look at the top of the snow mountain? He stretched out his arms to wave to Archmage Belbo. The Archmage was packing up the measuring instruments all over the ground. He didn't come over when he saw this. He only used the wind communication technique to send over a sentence. What's the matter? Elder brother, can you dash? Halfway through his words, Greet suddenly felt a chill running down his spine and quickly turned around to look north. At the same time, Cyrilla, Idion, and Balbo raised their heads at the same time and looked to the north. Boom! The sky is broken. On the top of the snow peak, the deep and distant blue sky shattered like a mirror. And in the shattered space, the sun was stronger than the midday sun, hotter than the erupting volcano, and the radiant fireball was rising slowly. The fireball rolled and rolled. Gradually, a familiar-looking thing with a big head and a small body, and a smoke column attached to the bottom, stood over the snowy peak. Gretel. Damn it! Sun God, these legends are annoying, don't explode a nuclear bomb. I took you to the secret realm of elves, did I take you by mistake? Ask for a guaranteed monthly ticket at the beginning of the month. Ask for a guaranteed monthly pass. Please help me keep this book in the top 10 of the monthly fantasy list. This exposure is very important to the author. Also, the book review area is open, so everyone can have fun. Thanks to @www for the reward of 100 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1192. Chapter 1189 E2 Legends. Have a full meal. Hiccup, please vote for me. Virakaka, the sun god, had a long dream. In the dream, he seemed to be a farmer. Plowing, irrigating, weeding, harvesting, worship the gods. Once a week, go to church to pray to the Lord of Glory. Once a year, give 1/10 of the harvest from your fields to the church. The great Lord of Radiance, give them food, give them abundance, give them peace and tranquility, he is the creator of the world and their protector. In the dream, he seemed to have become a warrior again. Train, guard, patrol, fight, worship the gods. Before going on an expedition, after a victory, or when you are injured and receiving treatment, pray to him sincerely and ask for his protection. The great Lord of Glory, grant them courage and give them confidence. Under his guidance, the brave warriors are invincible. Farmers, warriors, priests, nobles, knights, sun god Virakaka had dreams one after another. In the dream, he passed through year after year and experienced the life of one believer after another. No matter which dream it was, the prayers praising the Lord of Glory, singing praises to the Lord of Glory, and glorifying the Lord of Glory always lingered around him. After listening for a long time, the sun god Virakaka seemed to feel that the Lord of Glory seems to be a great, righteous, noble, and worthy of belief. No. Virakaka struggled, resisted, and woke up from the dream again and again. Can't sleep, can't be affected by these memories. I am Virakaka, the great sun god. I cannot believe in other gods. He struggled and resisted with all his strength, and even launched a blood sacrifice to use the souls of believers to kill these foreign souls. However, it was not until he met Gretel and received a large number of gifts from the world that he was able to use a gentler method to exclude these foreign souls from his body. Until the light of these souls no longer burns him or affects him, he can calmly study, analyze, and appreciate those memories, study the nature of the power of the Lord of Glory, and study the mysteries of the other party's magical skills. It is indeed very strong, but it can't beat me. Virakaka thought silently. I understand your secret. From now on, you can never hurt me again, Lord of Glory. If your people attack me in this way, it will become your biggest regret and weakness. Those priests, those ascetics, those knights, those who are the most devout, the most steadfast souls, those who are promised eternal blessings, are accepted, attracted, and ascend to the mountain of heaven. Those souls used to harm other gods in the divine descending technique. The memories they carried were read, analyzed, and absorbed one by Virakaka. And these memories, and the knowledge gained from these memories, have indeed broadened the horizons of the sun god Virakaka and broadened his knowledge. When he fought against the glory legend, his methods became more and more calm, and he became more and more capable of defusing, restraining, and utilizing the opponent's attacks. He can even use these remaining souls to pretend to be injured. Concentrate your own power, form a protective layer on the surface, and gather those souls into a wound. Then, when the enemy's attack comes, let go of the gathered remnant souls and let them seem to spread throughout the body, pretending to be severely injured. Attack! Attack! When you let down your guard and attack with all your strength, that's when I will fight back with all my strength. He gathers strength, counterattacks, and devours. Swallow the phantom of the angel, swallow the sword energy of the legendary warrior, and swallow the fragments of the exploded heaven mountain. Then, using the temples everywhere as anchor points, he pursued the aura of the Lord of Glory and pursued the past. Here, not. A group of foreign warriors have already invaded his city, destroyed his temple, and are looting. Virakaka angrily threw a golden light, cutting the leader's warriors into two pieces, and then blessed his own priests and warriors. Not here, either. Another group of foreign warriors were rushing on the snowy mountain road. Virakaka shook the snowy peaks with rage, and rolled down the snow, burying them. Here, not yet. Another group of foreign warriors drove the people of the Kingdom of the Sun to walk on the plateau with difficulty. Virakaka looked down at his people. They were tired and skinny. The fire of life was so weak that it was about to go out, and the breath of the sun was so weak that it was about to disappear. Already, have you almost forgotten me? The brilliance on Virakaka's body shone slightly, then quietly dimmed. Human life is too short. If the temple is destroyed and the belief in the sun god is prohibited, it only takes 1 generation, 2 generations. In a few decades or 100 years, the gods who once protected them could be completely forgotten. Virakaka restrained his desire to take action and only quietly cast a little bit of power on those few people who still had the aura of the sun. Then, he walked around in a circle and gave the oracle to the surrounding temples. There are enemies around. Take up your weapons, gather your strength, fight, annihilate, protect. Once, twice, I finally caught the traces of those two legends. After traveling hundreds of miles quickly, the legendary priest was already almost exhausted, lying softly on the back of his companion, his white robe floating gently. And the legendary swordsman, carrying his companions on his back, flew between the mountains so fast that he almost left an after-image. One step forward, dozens of flying steps, another step forward, and another dozens of steps. When they encounter canyons or mountain streams, they sprint from a distance and jump as hard as they can. Jumping to the highest point, the white robe on the legendary priest gently opened and turned into a ball of white light that enveloped them. The white light held them up and glided with the wind. Although the speed is not as fast as the legendary warriors running, it is much less laborious. After floating for a moment, he landed on the opposite mountain and continued running. Found it? That's you. I've locked onto your breath. As long as the sun shines, I can see you, despicable outsiders, You, don't even think about escaping. Virakaka, the sun god, waited patiently. One mountain ridge, another mountain ridge, until the legendary warrior jumped up with all his strength and jumped over a particularly wide mountain stream. He suddenly appeared and stood lightly in front of the two of them. In the mountain stream, in front of the gliding path, the sun reflected in the deep pool of the stream suddenly rose in the sky. A ring of the sun hung directly in front of the two of them, blocking their gliding path. Quickly rewind. Governor Martinez's eyes were filled with tears. At this moment, he really regretted that he should not have launched this battle rashly. At the very least, he should have made sufficient preparations to attract more legends from the country to help before launching this battle. The other party is a demigod. Even if he is an indigenous demigod, he is still a genuine demigod. Even if he personally killed the demigod back then, it was only with the support of the Holy See and the assistance of several legendary comrades. 4 or more legends can seriously injure a demigod if they are well prepared and ambushed, calculated mentally or not. 2 legends are really too reluctant. Moreover, when did that false god recover from his injuries? He has no idea. All the information in advance and all the investigations into the Sun Temple came to the conclusion that the false god was weakening, and constantly weakening. The bright sun is approaching. This great sun, half substantial, half illusory, was not so bright that people could not open their eyes, nor was it so painful that it burned the skin. But the more this happened, the more panicked Governor Martinez felt. This phenomenon either means that the false god has been able to restrain his power well, or it means that the other party has not yet fully arrived. Either way, there is not much time left for them. The white light quickly turned into wings, flapping and flapping vigorously, trying to change direction and escape the attraction of the big Sunday. However, no matter how hard you flap, the wings made of divine magic are of no use in front of a demigod. Close, close, getting closer. The illusory sun disk seems to have arrived in front of us. Let's go. Governor Martinez turned around suddenly. Grabbing Archbishop Bartolome on his back, he used all his strength and threw it outward. Go. Go quickly. Escape back. Do whatever it takes to escape back. Escape back to the Viceroyalty, escape to the cathedral, activate the defense of the cathedral, and call for reinforcements from the glorious Holy See. Only by receiving support from the Holy See as soon as possible can the Viceroyalty be preserved. Otherwise, everyone in the Holy See is there, everyone in the kingdom is there, those knights, those guards, those adventurers, those businessmen, and even the descendants who have reproduced for decades. All will die. Everyone must die. The Archbishop drew a white arc, like a shooting star, crashing into the mountains in his path. In contrast, Governor Martinez also flew in the completely opposite direction. He summoned up all his strength, wrapped in the flames transformed from fighting spirit, life, and soul, and crashed into the center of the sun. The sun god Viracocha was happy at first, and then annoyed. Fortunately, this legendary warrior jumped in on his own initiative. The taste of the legendary warrior is much better than the soul. The abundant blood and vitality can make him have a full meal. So full. After this meal, have a good sleep. It doesn't matter if you don't enjoy the blood sacrifice for decades. What's frustrating is that it takes a lot of time to absorb him or even kill him. The warrior rushed left and right in the sun circle, constantly slashing with his sword. Even if he tried his best to burn, he couldn't take down the opponent. And the other legend, the sinister and despicable legend who attacked him with many, many souls, is about to escape. No escape. No one can escape. Viracocha, the sun god, gathered all his power. No, it would be a pity to kill it like this, it would be such a loss. This little bit of strength I only saved up after working in the forest for a long time and almost dying of exhaustion. Change your approach. It just so happened that when I was working in the forest, I dug some ore. The ore that little Gretel once secretly told his friends don't dig too much, let alone gather it together. Get them together. Set them on fire. I've been doing it for so long, I can handle the burn, but you can't. Boom. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Please let the cat stay in the top 10 of the fantasy monthly ticket list, stay there, stay steadily. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1193. Bright light like never seen before. Heat like never before. Governor Martinez held the sword tightly in his hand, and every knuckle turned pale. He took a deep breath, letting the hot air rush into his lungs and burning his internal organs without hesitation. Let the raging war energy flow around the body, igniting every bone, every muscle, every tiny part of the body. Oh, those damn pagans seem to call those things cells. But that's not important. The important thing is that I would rather push myself to the limit, and burn myself out than to take advantage of that false god. It's just a false god, he roared in his heart. Seize the power of light and heat, pretend to be the sun god, and seduce the people of the great Lord of Glory. The devil who wants to kill his own people and enjoy the blood sacrifice. The light and heat of the Lord of Glory are much stronger than those fabricated by you. He fought to the death at all costs. A legendary warrior fought with all his strength, and even channeled the holy power of the Lord of Glory with all his strength, letting it burn blazingly in his body. The power that burst out was so powerful. Even if the sun was scorching, making him shed tears, burning his hair and beard with sparks, and even causing severe pain on his skin and the smell of barbecue. But don't be afraid. I am not even afraid of death anymore, who else should I be afraid of? He grasped the sword tightly and fell towards the sun, while swinging the sword with all his strength. The first sword, the second sword, the third sword. Soar, dodge, attack. Delay time. Delay time. For Archbishop Bartolome, for the Viceroyalty, and for the Holy Lord of Glory, buy as much time as possible. Then, he saw a bright spot rising in front of him, surpassing all the brilliance in the world. It's so bright, is this the sun? I have never seen such a bright light. The white light spot suddenly expanded. Swelling, swelling, a bright light that has never been seen before, covering all the colors in the world. At the moment when he lost his sight and was about to lose consciousness, Governor Martinez thought blankly. Will the Lord of Glory possess, or control, such a strong light? He had no time to think more. After the strong light, the fireball expanded rapidly, and the immeasurable heat accompanying the immeasurable brilliance engulfed him in an instant. If it is a legendary magician who is full of energy, fully prepared, and distances himself, he may be able to resist for a while. However, for a legendary warrior who is extremely exhausted and the distance from the explosive heart is also extremely close. Hair, skin, muscles, internal organs, blood, bones, even souls. In an instant, it was shattered into pieces by the impact, and was reduced to nothing in the earth-shattering explosion. My food. Virakaka, the sun god, let out a miserable howl. His prisoner. His food. Such a big legendary warrior. It's already on your lips. There was such a booming sound, and suddenly, there was nothing. Moreover, it hurts, it really hurts, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts, impact, burning, tearing. Why, the explosions ignited by these ores were completely different from the explosions he encountered in the Elven secret realm. Not the same thing. This is, the moment he gained consciousness and opened his eyes to the world, the round he saw was a fireball as bright as 1,000 suns. Do not care. If you didn't get it in your mouth this time, you must get it in your mouth next time. When you finish eating, eat this fireball slowly to absorb all the huge light and heat. The sun god Virakaka focused all his attention on the remaining legend. As luck would have it, the legendary priest hasn't been completely burned yet, with half of it still tumbling in the air. Although it's a little burnt, a little broken, and a little wilted, and the legendary priest's body is not strong, it's not as delicious as the legendary warrior, but at least it can still be eaten. The sun's disk rotates, and the head of the bag falls down. He got a mess, a mess. There is no firm belief, no belief resonates with spiritual power resonates with blood, burning to the extreme abundance, and even no emotion strong enough to summon the gods. Joy, sadness, gratitude, anger, fear, determination, sacrifice. Nothing at all. The moment the sun erupted and enveloped the legendary priest, the sun god Virakaka only sensed a confused reverberation. O Lord of Glory! Is there any brilliance more powerful than my Lord in this world? Then, there was nothing. That little bit of power, like particles and dust, that has begun to disintegrate, can't make up for the loss of his attack this time, let alone the loss of him being blown up like this. What a loss! Virakaka turned around in the air, looking down, the mountains shook, rocks disintegrated, houses fell, and the ground cracked. Trees, pastures, people, livestock, the nearest ones, have all been reduced to ashes in the huge explosion. The vitality of those further away has also been greatly weakened. Some are already dead, and some are still breathing their last breath and are shouting blankly, praying to the sun god for help. What a loss! What a huge loss this time! Let's slowly absorb the light and heat. If you can absorb a little, just absorb a little. Next time, if you want to use this trick again, be sure not to get close to the people. Virakaka, the sun god, turned into a ball of light and hung over the valley, intending to try to make up for some of the losses. Hundreds of miles away, in the distant holy lake, Gretel was busy arguing with Archmage Baebo. Let me go over and have a look. Don't go. I'll just take a look from a distance. Don't get close. Don't go. The fight isn't over yet. If there's an accident, I won't be able to escape. Of course the one struggling to rush over couldn't be Gretel himself. In fact, when there are a large number of injuries that need treatment, Greet would not want to go anywhere else. Has the bleeding stopped? Life was saved? The fractures haven't healed yet. There are some broken limbs. Let's see if they can be rejoined while they are freshly cut off. Ah, there are people lying on the ground over there, with a pair of wings suddenly growing out of their backs, or hair suddenly growing out of their faces. Hurry up and see what's going on. Gretel was so busy that he wished that 3 heads and 6 arms could grow on the spot, and he wished that he had the ability to clone himself. In this case, every one of you should try to stay close to you, especially high-level mages like Senior Brother Baebo. If you don't know how to heal, you can at least use various magics. Explore. Shoot. Record. Those with wings on their backs, fur on their faces, fangs in their mouths. One by one, at least use magic to record their situation so that I can analyze them later. Don't go. Help me a little longer. Don't get close until it gets quiet over there. What if a seriously injured legend rushes out? What if it's that legendary warrior who just gives you a sword? Gretel firmly stopped his senior brother by his side. As for Udian, he wouldn't rush over without him stopping him. Although elves do not regard humans as the same kind, especially the indigenous people, they will never ignore death. After consuming 2/3 of his healing skills, Udian had already rolled up his sleeves and participated in the on-site disaster relief. Move rocks. Digging through the ruins. Carry the wounded. If you can save someone, you are one. If you can help someone, you are one. So many people were pressed under the pile of stones in the temple, waiting for his help to dig them out. Archmage Baebo was uneasy. Examine a patient and look back, explore another patient and look back again. On the top of the distant snow peak, the mushroom cloud stood high and did not disperse for a long time. And a bright ball of light hung in the center of the mushroom cloud, shining in all directions, competing with the scorching sun in the sky. What on earth is this explosion and this ball of light? How did you get it? In my impression, the glory holy sea does not have such magic. Is it the magic of the sun god? Such a big explosion just now, the waves have been transmitted all the way here. What is the source of the explosion? What is the mechanism of explosion? Is this ball of light a condensation of divine magic from the explosion that has not dissipated yet, or is it the incarnation of the sun god? It's a pity that I didn't go to the site in person just now. I really want to go and check it out. If the sun god himself appears, the two legends on the opposite side, are they dead? Or got caught? Forget it. Let me ask you a question. Gretel sighed when he saw him turning back every step and every 3 steps. The mushroom clouds have stood up, and everything that should be fried should have been blown up. After receiving such a shot at close range, according to the equivalent exchange of equivalent and legendary spell energy, the two legends were either dead or disabled. And the sun god Virakaka was hanging there clearly, so he was probably fine. Senior brother is going over now. As long as you take good precautions, there should be no problem with safety. Your Majesty the High Priest, he put down his work and rushed over. Your Majesty the High Priest. Could you please ask the oracle for help? How is the situation over there with the great sun god? Can we go over and have a look? High Priest. It's so busy here. There are a bunch of people lying on the ground waiting for rescue. You asked me to ask the oracle just to go and have a look. What do you think I am? Human power station. Whenever you think of it, send a message to the sun god. What do you think the sun god is? Forget it, I was of great help this time. Having just escaped death, the high priest, who had been saved by someone else, calmed down and summoned a few disciples to start preparing for the divine descending ceremony. There are a lot of things to do here, and someone needs to take charge of the overall situation. Apart from anything else, His Majesty the King seems to have died, and a new king still needs to be elected and approved by the sun god's oracle. They played panpipes and recorders. The wooden drum was broken and they could only beat the golden plate used for sacrifice. Burning incense by the holy lake and starting the ceremony, the high priest was just about to pray when a head suddenly stretched out from beside him. Hey, Cyrilla's long silver hair was flying in the wind, and her silver blue eyes narrowed into 2 crescent moons when she smiled. Your king, do you want me to help you fish it out? By the way, could you please help me fish out some of the gold in the lake? Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. The cat rolled over, showed its belly, and raised 4 small pink paws to summon the monthly ticket.